to introduce Helen. She is actually one of the founding teachers of Psychosynthesakademin back in 1989. And she lives in the UK and is today more of an executive coach than a therapist. And she will. Yeah, I'm happy to have you back here in Stockholm, Helen. What is it like to be back? Talking about connecting to place. It's great to have you back in Stockholm. Welcome up on stage.
Thank you. I just hope I didn't set it for 9 hours from now, because then you.
We'll see.
It's great to be back. It's so good to be back. I think I just feel such a deep connection to the people I know here, the students that I've worked with for many years. Frederick, who was in the first group. There's a deep current here for me. But it's not just the people, and it's not just the academy. It's also, I feel, a real deep connection to the place and to Stockholm and to Sweden. And I think that's what I want to pick up a little bit on. It's the small things I remember. I haven't worked here for 8 or 9 years, something like that. But I remember the cherry blossoms on Kungsträdgården. And I remember the scent of a lilac in May. Just walking down the street in the city, and there it is. And I remember we used to take from where the academy is, there's that little ferry across. And I used to take the ferry across to meet Mona for supper in Jimmy's steakhouse. And the sound of the ice on the boat in the winter as we made that little ferry crossing, it's something, the smell of the ice. And then the rock, the warmth of the rock, that you have special kind of rocks here, the water, the reflections on the water, the quality of the light. There's not one, they're the things that I remember as well as you lovely people. Strawberries. I mean, how could your strawberries be so much better than our English strawberries that we make such a fuss about? But it's more than just random memories, because what I'm reaching for is the sense of the soul of a place, a sense of place. I did my master's thesis on, it was called Granite Song, and it was about a sense of place. And for me, that's a deep connection with the transpersonal. I first I think it was 40 years ago when I was first a student and was taught about what the transpersonal is. And in those years, my understanding and experience of what the transpersonal means has changed. And I'm hoping that it's going to continue to evolve and change until the day that I go, die, whatever. So it's that sense of a soul of a place, a sense of place that's entangled with the world. It's not up and over there, it's not some distant other place that's a long way for us and we have to work very hard to get to, which was what I was first taught 40 years ago, that sense of the transpersonal. It's here, entangled with place. It connects us with something beyond me and this small ego, but it's not distant. It's as close as a breath. It's embodied and rooted and in small everyday details of life. The touch of a child's hand, strawberries. And it includes very small, I'm seeing more and more small, easy to overlook everyday events. Margot Russell, who I kind of worked with in the early days here, used to talk about bells and whistles for those big transpersonal experiences. And she used to get so upset because she said, I don't get bells and whistles. I don't get peak experiences. And I used to go, oh, me neither. But what I realize is that it's not about bells and whistles necessarily. There's a place for them. But if you don't have bells and whistles, you can have something else. So for me, it includes beauty, it includes belonging, longing, desire, connection. It's essentially about connection with the self and with the world. And love, more than anything. And I think it's a love that broadens and deepens our connections with each other, and that tie us to each other and to the world, and embed us in the fabric of life, which is where the link is with the state of the world and climate change, which is something that I care deeply about. But there needs to be a crack or a gap or a little space or a pause for us to make that connection, because often we're too busy to make that connection. Often the first thing, if I haven't seen somebody for a while, the first thing they'll say to me is, are you busy? And I go, enough. Because it's not about being busy. If you're busy, the gap, the space can't happen. And what happens when there is a space, that there's an approach that can happen. So it's almost as if the world wants to be known. I'm talking about the non-human world here, the more than human world, place. It wants to approach, it wants to be known, it wants to be heard. And it's only from that deep listening that we can take actions that are wise actions for the world. Otherwise we get into fixing it. And actually it doesn't need to be fixed. The world needs something more from us. It needs us to be in right relationship. So, and there's a particular vitality and presence in these moments. And they're more common. They're actually incredibly common. You sit down in a room with most people and they'll say, oh yes, if you give the space, I remember that time when. Oh, it was over in a moment, but it meant something. There was a vitality and a presence to them. So this is part of what I wanted to write about in the chapter. When I was asked to contribute by Amy, she said, come write about transpersonal psychosynthesis. And I said, yes. And then I thought, what? So I wanted to do something very personal. I wanted to do something a little vulnerable that would expose me, that wouldn't be hiding behind theory. And to give you a taste of how I've approached this, I want to read a story I tell at the beginning of the chapter. And this is a true story. It really happened, and it happens quite often. It's not exotic. One warm August night, I put my work aside and head outside. I'm alone. Switching off the lights, I grope my way through the house and across the threshold into the night. Oh. Stop it. Ah. Bells and whistles, I'll carry on. Across the threshold into the night, tracing the wall with my finger. That was only the 8-minute warning, so I'm not out of time yet. Tracing the wall with my fingertips to find my way, I lower myself onto the bench that I know is there, but can't see. The house is black to the back of me. A granite presence, felt but unseen. Silence fills the night. Soft, deep, bottomless darkness is rare, even here on Dartmoor. In summer, the Milky Way rises high, splashed across the sky in the east and south. 13 billion years old, 100,000 light years across, countless stars, perhaps 90% dark matter, whatever that is. It is full of mystery and beauty. And although Earth is embedded in our galaxy, we can still see into the center, and the possibility of glimpsing this bright, cloudy heart is what brought me outside. It's so dark I can't see the fence 2 meters away. Curious, I hold my palm up to my face. I feel warmth radiating from my palms. My eyes are wide open, but see nothing. And then, without warning, I find myself untethered, bearings lost, pouring into soft, silent, roaring night, joining with the world around me. Whatever it is that usually holds me to anchor is loosed, and I feel both decanted into and filled by a presence that enfolds this place. Still conscious, still myself, but somehow held in an unfathomable, dynamic aliveness. And then, in the space of a few heartbeats, I'm cast back on the shore of myself. There's a folding together of presences, the warm, sweet moonlight night, the bright stars and me on the bench, a fleeting sense of kinship with an open and responsive cosmos, a cosmos alive with its own purposes and being, and a glimpse of human consciousness as only one form of consciousness in a world filled with many different voices, songs, intelligence. And that's the sense I wanted to bring to the chapter that I wrote. And I guess the question is, why does it matter? And I think that if we're to respond to the twists and turns of what's happening in the world, that's filled as it is with beauty, but also with environmental, political, economic crisis, catastrophe even, uncertainty, then we need to do what an early teacher of mine, Joanna Macy, called holding the gaze. We need to find a place where we can hold the gaze with the beauty and with the pain and with the catastrophe. And it's through that that we will learn to hear what she says is, what is the world asking of us? And that's why noticing matters. That's why paying attention matters. So by turning loving attention to small, everyday things we might overlook, we might find what the world is asking of us. And that's kind of what I hoped the reader would go away with after reading the chapter, this sense that small things can be big things. And Asa Jolie always stressed that transpersonal experiences, whether immanent or transcendent, are not there to be experienced for their own selves, but they're there for practical purposes, to increase creativity, give oneself to a chosen field, and be more effective in our service to the world. So that's all I want to say, really. Okay.